The meeting hall on Harmony Point Space Station buzzed with quiet conversations in dozens of alien languages. Captain Jake Morrison adjusted his dress uniform and looked around the massive circular room. Representatives from 43 different species sat in specially designed chairs that accommodated their various body types. Some had tentacles, others had multiple arms, and a few floated in special atmosphere bubbles. Jake had never seen so many different aliens in one place as one. Of Earth's newest members in the Galactic Coalition, humans were still learning about their neighbors. Next to him, diplomat Lisa Hamilton checked her recording device for the third time. She wanted to make sure they captured every word of this important briefing. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered to Jake. "3 months ago, we thought we were alone in the universe. Now look at this." Jake nodded, but kept his eyes on the stage. A tall, reptilian figure walked to the center podium. This was Ambassador Zektar, one of the most respected diplomats in the galaxy. His green scales caught the light as he moved, and his yellow eyes seemed to see everything at once. Jake had read that Zektar was over 300 years old and had helped negotiate peace between dozens of warring species. "Welcome, new members of our great coalition," Zektar began. His voice carried clearly through the room's translation system. "Today, I will share important information about the combat capabilities of our member species. This knowledge may save your lives one day." The room fell silent. Even the floating gas beings stopped their gentle movements. Combat capabilities were serious business in a galaxy where conflicts could erupt between species with very different ideas about warfare. Zektar activated a holographic display that showed the first species. The Morthok are known for their incredible strength. One Morthok warrior can lift 10 times their body weight, and their thick hide can stop most energy weapons. However, they are slow to anger and prefer to avoid conflict when possible. The display changed to show insect-like creatures. The Zephyrians fight in perfect coordination. Their hive mind allows them to act as one unit. They can overwhelm enemies through sheer numbers and flawless teamwork, but they struggle when separated from their collective consciousness. Jake found himself taking mental notes. This information could be vital for Earth's military planning. He watched as Zektar described species after species. The Corvin with their energy manipulation abilities, the massive Gorloth, who could survive in the vacuum of space, the Thakari, whose natural camouflage made them nearly invisible. Each description followed the same pattern. Zektar would explain the species' strengths, then mention their limitations or weaknesses. It seemed like a fair and balanced assessment of galactic military capabilities. "The Velkari are master strategists," Zektar continued. "Their advanced brains can process battle scenarios faster than most computers. They can predict enemy movements with remarkable accuracy. However, they become paralyzed when faced with truly unpredictable opponents." Lisa leaned closer to Jake. "He's being very thorough. I wonder what he'll say about humans." Jake wondered the same thing. Humans were the newest species in the coalition, and their military record was limited to conflicts on Earth. They had no experience with alien warfare or technology. What could Zektar possibly say about human combat capabilities? The holographic display cycled through more species. The shape-shifting Draenari, the psychic Mentari who could influence enemy thoughts, the crystalline quartz folk whose bodies could channel and redirect energy attacks. Each species had impressive abilities, but also clear limitations. Finally, the display showed a human figure. The room seemed to grow quieter, if that was possible. Jake felt dozens of alien eyes turning toward the small human delegation. But something strange happened. Zektar, who had been speaking in a confident, professional tone throughout the presentation, suddenly hesitated. His reptilian features tightened, and Jake could have sworn he saw the ambassador's hands tremble slightly. "Humans," Zektar said, and his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "The newest members of our coalition come from a world they call Earth." The display showed basic information about human physiology. Average height, weight, strength levels. Compared to most species in the room, humans looked unimpressive. No natural armor, no energy manipulation, no telepathic abilities. Just soft, Pink creatures with basic technology. Several alien delegates made sounds that the translation system rendered as chuckles or dismissive clicks. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he remained professional. Lisa placed a calming hand on his arm. Humans appear to be a typical carbon-based species, Zektar continued. They have average physical strength, standard sensory capabilities, and limited technological development. Their weapons are primitive chemical projectiles and basic energy beams. Their armor is simple metal and ceramic composites. More chuckling. From the audience, Jake noticed that even some of the more diplomatic species seemed amused, a floating gas being near the front made a sound like escaping air that the translator interpreted as laughter. But Zektar wasn't finished. His yellow eyes swept the room, and when he continued speaking, his voice dropped to almost a whisper. Yet somehow every being in the hall heard him clearly. However, he said, humans possess something that makes them more dangerous than any species I have encountered in 3 centuries of diplomatic service. The laughter stopped. The room became so quiet that Jake could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. Deep within the human brain lies an ancient neural pathway. Most species have built-in limiters that prevent them from fighting. Beyond rational thought, these limiters keep them alive by preventing suicidal behavior. But humans can override these limiters completely. Zektar's scaled hands gripped the podium. When humans reach a certain level of emotional stress, particularly when protecting others, they enter what they call a berserker state. In this condition, they feel no pain. They ignore fatal wounds. They abandon all self-preservation instincts. Most terrifying of all, their tactical thinking doesn't disappear. It transforms into something purely predatory. The ambassador's eyes found Jake in the crowd. When humans go berserk, they don't just fight harder, they fight smarter. They use their environment in ways that confuse enemy computers. They coordinate without communication. They sacrifice themselves for complete strangers without hesitation. A delegate from the warrior species Keth Mori stood up. He was 7 feet tall with natural armor plating and 4 arms. Ambassador Zektar, surely you exaggerate. These humans look weak. How dangerous can they really be? Zektar's expression became grim. General Korthmer, I have seen the archaeological evidence. Long ago, there was another species with similar capabilities. They were called the Crane Tai, nearly conquered half the galaxy before they transcended physical existence. The Kethmori general laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. Fairy tales, Ambassador. These soft creatures couldn't threaten a child. Other delegates began murmuring agreement. The impressive presentation about human berserker states seemed less credible when they looked at Jake and his small delegation. Humans looked so ordinary, so fragile compared to the armored, clawed, and tentacled beings around them. But Zektar didn't back down. I pray you never have to learn the truth, General. But if you do encounter humans in their berserker state, remember this warning. Run. Don't try to fight them. Don't try to reason with them. Just run and hope they don't consider you a threat. 2. Innocence. The session ended with most delegates clearly unconvinced. As the crowd dispersed, Jake and Lisa gathered their notes. They had planned to return to their quarters, but Zektar approached them directly. Captain Morrison, Diplomat Hamilton, he said quietly, might I speak with you privately? Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. The ambassador's demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the official diplomatic presence. In its place was something that looked almost like fear. Ambassador, we'd be honored, Lisa replied. Zektar led them to a small conference room away from the main hall. Once the door sealed, he turned to face them. His yellow eyes held an intensity that made Jake unconsciously straighten his posture. Duh! Must understand, Zektar said. My warning was not meant to insult your species. It was meant to protect everyone else. Dr. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her microscope as the morning alarm chimed through the New Haven research facility. The sound meant it was time for the daily briefing with the other scientists. She stretched her tired muscles and rubbed her eyes. She'd been working on alien plant samples for 14 hours straight, but the discovery was too exciting to stop. The research station on New Haven was humanity's first joint scientific project with other species. 47 scientists from 12 different worlds worked together in the sprawling complex. Amy loved the collaboration. Every day brought new discoveries about biology, chemistry, and physics from alien perspectives. "Amy, you need to see this," called Dr. Peter Collins from across the lab. Peter was a xenobiologist who specialized in studying alien life forms. His enthusiasm for his work was infectious, and he had become one of Amy's closest friends during their 6 months on New Haven DoD. Amy, he walked over to Peter's workstation, where he was examining something under a powerful scanner. On the screen, she could see cellular structures, unlike anything from Earth. The cells seemed to pulse with their own internal light. "These samples came from the Therian scientist Dr. Velmer," Peter explained excitedly. "They're from a plant that can apparently survive in pure vacuum. If we can understand how it works, we might be able to develop new materials for spacecraft." Amy leaned closer to study the data. The cell walls had a crystalline structure that seemed to shift and adapt to environmental changes. It was beautiful and impossible according to Earth biology. "This could change everything we know about life in space," she said. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud bang from somewhere in the facility, then another. Amy and Peter looked at each other with concern. The sounds were too loud and too sharp to be normal equipment noises. "Attention all personnel," came a voice over the communication system. It was Dr. Kenthara, the Veltari scientist, who served as the facilities coordinator. Her translated voice sounded strained. "We have an emergency situation. Please remain calm and stay in your current locations." Amy felt her heart rate increase. Emergency situations on an isolated research station could mean many things, none of them good. Equipment failures, atmospheric problems, or even asteroid impacts were all possibilities. More loud bangs echoed through the facility, followed by what sounded like breaking glass. Peter moved to the lab's communication panel and tried to contact the security office. No response. "Amy, I think we should get out of here," Peter said quietly. Before Amy could respond, the lab door burst open. 3 figures in dark armor stormed in, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. Amy recognized them immediately from the Coalition databases. Kethmori soldiers, the warrior species that General Korthmer had represented at the Harmony Point meeting. The soldiers were even more intimidating in person than in the recordings. 7 feet tall, with natural armor plating covering their forearms. Their faces were hidden behind combat masks, but their body language radiated aggression and confidence. "All biologicals will cease activity and submit to capture the lead," Soldier announced through his helmet speaker. The translation was mechanical and cold. "What's going on?" Amy asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "This is a research facility. We're not military." The soldier ignored her question and gestured with his weapon toward the lab's exit. "Move. Now." Amy and Peter had no choice but to comply. They were escorted through corridors filled with other captured scientists. Amy saw Dr. Velmer, the Therian, whose plant samples had been so exciting just minutes ago. The gentle, tree-like alien looked terrified. His bark-like skin had turned a pale green color that Amy had learned indicated extreme fear in his species. The Kethmori had rounded up everyone in the main assembly hall. Amy counted 38 scientists and staff members, 9 humans, including herself and Peter, along with representatives from 11 other species. The maintenance staff was there too, including Tony Garcia, a quiet man from Earth who had 3 children back home. Tony looked confused and scared. He was just a technician who kept the facility's systems running. His biggest concern each day was usually making sure the alien atmospheric processors didn't malfunction. Now he was surrounded by armed soldiers from a species known for their brutality. "Why are you doing this?" demanded Dr. Zephanel, a senior researcher from the Corvin species. "We are scientists. We pose no threat to anyone." The lead Kethmori soldier removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face with predatory eyes. "Your coalition thinks it can dictate terms to the Kethmori Empire. You will learn the price of defying true warriors." Amy's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a raid or a robbery. This was a political statement. Kethmori were making an example of the research facility to send a message to the coalition. "Please," said Dr. Kenthara, the facility coordinator. We are non-combatants. Our work here benefits all species, including yours." The Kethmori commander laughed, a harsh sound that made several of the alien scientists flinch. "Your work creates weapons. All knowledge becomes weapons eventually." Amy wanted to protest. They were studying plants and minerals, not developing military technology. But something in the commander's expression told her that facts wouldn't matter here. 2 more Kethmori soldiers entered the hall, dragging a struggling figure between them. It was Karen Bell, the facility's security chief. Karen was a former Earth military officer who had taken the job because she wanted a quiet retirement among the stars. Her face was bloody, and her left arm hung at an odd angle. "This one tried to resist," one of the soldiers reported. "She disabled 3 of our warriors before we subdued her." The commander studied Karen with what might have been respect. Impressive for such a small creature, but futile. Karen raised her head and looked directly at the commander. Despite her injuries, her eyes showed no fear. "My job is to protect these people. That includes protecting them from you." The commander's expression darkened. "Your job is over." He raised his sidearm and fired. The energy bolt caught Karen in the chest, and she collapsed instantly. Several of the alien scientists made sounds of distress. Dr. Kenthara began what sounded like a prayer in her native language. Amy stared at Karen's still form in shock. Security chief had been alive just seconds ago. She had been talking, defiant, brave. Now, she was gone. Killed for doing her job, but it was Peter's reaction that changed everything. Peter had been standing next to Amy, quiet and scared like everyone else. When he saw Karen fall, something shifted in his expression. Pale, then flushed red. His hands began to shake, not with fear, but with something else entirely. "You didn't have to kill her," Peter said quietly. The commander turned toward him. "Speak up, soft thing. I cannot hear your whimpering." Peter's voice grew stronger. "I said you didn't have to kill her. She was just doing her job. She wasn't a threat to you." "All resistance is threat," the commander replied dismissively. "Her death teaches the rest of you proper behavior." That's when Amy saw it happen. Peter's eyes changed. The fear disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. His body posture shifted from cowering scientist to something predatory. When he spoke again, his voice was calm and steady. "No," Peter said. "Her death teaches us something else entirely." The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. Peter looked like the same mild-mannered scientist he had been minutes ago, but everything about his presence had changed. Amy felt a chill run down her spine, and she wasn't sure why. The Kethmori commander seemed to notice the change too. His 4 hands moved slightly toward his weapons, an instinctive response to something his warrior instincts had detected. "Did you say?" the commander asked. Peter smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "I said you've taught us something important. You've taught us that talking won't work. You've taught us that being reasonable won't work. You've taught us that you only understand one language." Amy looked around the room and saw that other humans were undergoing the same transformation. Tony Garcia, the quiet maintenance worker, was staring at Karen's body with an expression that made Amy's heart race. His hands were no longer shaking with fear. They were steady, purposeful, calculating. The aliens in the room seemed to sense the change too. Dr. Velmer's bark-like skin had turned from pale green to a deep purple that Amy had never seen before. The other species were making nervous sounds and shifting away from the humans. But the Kethmori soldiers, for all their warrior training, didn't understand what was happening. They saw the same soft, weak humans they had captured. They didn't recognize the signs that their own actions had triggered something ancient and dangerous. The commander stepped closer to Peter, towering over the human scientist. "You will learn to fear us like all the others." Peter looked up at the 7-foot warrior without flinching. "No," he said softly. "You're going to learn to fear us." The change was spreading. Amy could feel it in herself now, a cold fury that made her think clearly for the first time since the soldiers had burst into her lab. She looked at her fellow humans and saw the same transformation in their eyes. The Kethmori had made a terrible mistake. They had killed an innocent person in front of humans. They had threatened non-combatants. Had decided that might made right. The escape pod bay filled with smoke and the sound of emergency alarms. Dr. Amy Rodriguez helped load the last of the wounded alien scientists into the transport ship. Hope's dawn. Her hands moved with steady efficiency despite the chaos around her. The berserker state that had overtaken the humans at New Haven had not faded. Instead, it had evolved into something more controlled, but equally dangerous. That's everyone. Called Tony Garcia from the loading dock, the maintenance worker, had somehow become their tactical coordinator during the facility battle. His transformation from quiet technician to combat leader still amazed Amy. Even though she had experienced her own change, the fight at New Haven had lasted 6 hours. 9 humans against 47 Kethmori soldiers. By the end, 31. Kethmori were dead or wounded, and the survivors had retreated to their ships. The humans had saved all but 3 of the alien scientists and staff. The cost had been heavy, but not in human lives. Peter Collins sat in the corner of the transport, his shirt torn and bloodied. A Kethmori energy blast had burned through his shoulder, but he had kept fighting until the evacuation was complete. Now he tended to Dr. Velmer, the Therian scientist whose leg had been broken during the battle. "How are you feeling?" Amy asked. Peter, as she checked his wound. "Different," Peter replied quietly. "I can still feel it, Amy. That state we were in. It's not gone. It's just waiting." Amy knew exactly what he meant. The berserker condition hadn't simply switched off when the immediate danger ended. It remained just below the surface, ready to emerge again if needed. She could feel her awareness expanded, processing details about their situation that her normal mind would have missed. Captain Jim Norton. The transport pilot approached them with concern written across his face. Jim was a civilian cargo hauler who had volunteered to evacuate the facility when the coalition received their distress signal. "We've got a problem," Jim announced. 3 Kethmori warships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're moving to intercept us. Amy looked at the tactical display Jim carried. 3 large ships against 1 small transport. Under normal circumstances, it would be hopeless. The transport had no weapons and limited shields. But Amy found herself analyzing the situation with the same cold calculation that had guided her. "Through the facility battle, how long until they reach us?" she asked. 20 minutes, maybe less," Jim replied. "I can try to run, but they're faster than we are." Tony Garcia moved to join their conversation. "How many people do they have on those ships?" Jim checked his scanner. "My computer estimates about 300 soldiers total, plus ship crews." "Why?" Tony's expression didn't change, but Amy saw something shift in his eyes. The same predatory focus that had emerged during the facility battle, because we need to know what we're dealing with. "Tony, we can't fight 3 warships," Jim protested. "This is a cargo transport, not a battleship." "We're not going to fight the ships, Tony," replied calmly. "We're going to fight the people on them," Amy understood immediately. The berserker state didn't just make humans fearless. It made them think in ways that confused their enemies. Instead of accepting the conventional wisdom that they were outgunned, they were looking for unconventional solutions. "The Kethmori will try to board us," Amy said, following Tony's logic. "They want prisoners for their political statement. If they just wanted us dead, they would have fired on us already." Peter looked up from treating Dr. Velmer, "So we let them board us." Jim stared at the humans like they had lost their minds. "You want to let 300 armed soldiers onto our ship?" "Not 300, Tony corrected. "They'll send boarding parties, maybe 30 or 40 soldiers at a time. They think we're helpless civilians." Amy felt the berserker state responding to the tactical challenge. Her mind began working through possibilities with mechanical precision. The transport has maintenance passages between the decks, emergency airlocks, tool storage compartments, environmental controls, Peter added, gravity manipulation, emergency lighting systems. Tony nodded. "They're thinking like conquerors. Boarding a helpless ship, or thinking like predators setting a trap." Dr. Velmer, despite his injury, had been listening to the conversation. His bark-like skin had shifted to a deep blue color that Amy had learned indicated confusion in his species. "Forgive me," Dr. Velmer said quietly, "but you are speaking of fighting trained warriors. You are scientists and technicians. Ami looked at the alien scientists with something that might have been sympathy. We were scientists and technicians. That was before they killed Karen and threatened innocents. Or something else, Peter. Finished. The next 20 minutes passed in focused preparation. The humans moved through the transport like they had been planning ship-to-ship combat their entire lives. Tony found the maintenance toolkits and distributed improvised weapons. Peter used his knowledge of alien physiology to identify weak points in Kethmori armor. Amy studied the ship's layout and identified choke points and ambush positions. The alien civilians watched in fascination and growing unease. They had seen the humans fight at New Haven, but this was different. This was preparation with inhuman efficiency and coordination. Incoming transmission, Jim announced from the pilot's station. The Kethmori want to talk. Put it through, Tony replied. The main screen flickered to life, showing the scarred face of a Kethmori commander. This one was different from the leader at New Haven, older, with more battle scars and decorations indicating high rank. I am War Leader Crexton, of the Kethmori 4th Battle Group, the alien announced. You will prepare for boarding and surrender all personnel immediately. Amy stepped forward to respond. This is Dr. Amy Rodriguez. We are transporting wounded civilians. We request safe passage under Coalition medical neutrality protocols. War Leader Crexton's expression showed contempt. Your Coalition protocols mean nothing to the Kethmori Empire. You will surrender, or we will take you by force. And if we refuse, Amy asked calmly, then you will learn why the Kethmori are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Amy looked directly into the war leader's eyes through the screen. We already learned something about Kethmori warriors at New Haven. Would you like to know what we learned? Crexton's scarred features tightened with anger. Speak quickly before I lose patience. We learned that Kethmori warriors die just like everyone else when you cut them. The transmission ended abruptly. Jim stared at Amy in shock. You just declared war on 3 warships full of the galaxy's most dangerous soldiers. Amy's expression remained calm. Oh. No. They declared war when they decided to murder innocent people. We're just accepting their declaration. The first boarding pod struck the transport's hull 15 minutes later. Emergency lights flashed as the pod's cutting tools breached the outer door. Amy, Tony, and Peter took positions in the corridor, leading from the airlock, while Jim and the alien civilians moved to the ship's most protected area. The airlock cycled open, and 20 Kethmori soldiers poured into the transport. They moved in perfect military formation, weapons ready, scanning for threats. What they found was an empty corridor with no signs of the ship's occupants. Spread out, the squad leader ordered. Find the biologicals. Command wants prisoners. Soldiers began moving through the ship in standard search patterns. They had done this hundreds of times before. Board a ship, locate the crew, secure the prisoners, simple and routine. They didn't notice the maintenance hatch opening silently behind them until Tony Garcia dropped from the ceiling onto the rear guard. The soldier's neck snapped before he could cry out. The Kethmori training was excellent, but it was designed for conventional combat against conventional enemies. It didn't prepare them for humans who had abandoned conventional thinking entirely. Peter emerged from a storage compartment and disabled 2 more soldiers before they understood what was happening. Amy used her knowledge of the ship's systems to flood one section with knockout gas while the humans held their breath and continued fighting. The boarding party that had expected to find cowering civilians instead found themselves being hunted. Through the corridors of their own prize, they tried to regroup, but the humans anticipated their movements. They attempted to call for reinforcements, but found their communications jammed by modifications Tony had made to the ship's systems. Within 30 minutes, 18 of the 20 soldiers were dead or unconscious. The 2 survivors had barricaded themselves in the cargo bay, calling desperately for extraction. This is Squad Leader Vorthak. One of them transmitted to the warships. The biologicals are not what they seem. We need immediate support. War Leader. Crexton's voice crackled through their communication system. Explain your situation, Squad Leader. Sir, the humans fight like nothing we have encountered. They use tactics that our computers cannot predict. They coordinate without communication. They ignore wounds that should incapacitate them. There was a long pause before Kreksan responded. Squad leader, you are reporting that 20 trained Kethmori warriors have been defeated by civilian scientists. Sir, these are not normal civilians. Something's wrong with them. They fight like they are possessed by war spirits. Amy's voice came through the cargo bay's intercom system. Squad leader Vorthak, you have 30 seconds to surrender before we come in after you. Ambassador Zektar sat in his private chambers aboard the Veltar diplomatic vessel, staring at reports that chilled his ancient blood. The data streaming in from the New Haven sector defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. 3 Kethmori warships with over 800 elite soldiers had failed to capture a single civilian transport carrying fewer than 50 beings. The most disturbing part was not the Kethmori failure. It was the method of their defeat. Zektar activated his secure communication array and waited for the connection to establish. When the screen flickered to life, it showed the wrinkled face of High Counselor Vekmar, the eldest member of the Veltar Concordat. Vekmar was over 600 years old and had lived through more galactic conflicts than any being alive. High Counselor Zektar began formally. I must invoke the ancient protocols. We have a Code Crimson situation. Vekmar's ancient eyes widened. Code Crimson had not been invoked in over 2,000 years. It meant the discovery of a species that posed an existential threat to galactic civilization. Explain yourself, Ambassador, Vekmar said gravely. Zektar transmitted the combat footage from New Haven and the transport battle. The humans have manifested the old capability. High Counselor, they are showing all the signs of Krantai heritage. The High Counselor was silent for several minutes as he reviewed the data. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of millennia. Are you certain of this assessment? Watch how they fight, Zektar replied. Look at their coordination. Without communication, see how they use their environment as a weapon. Notice how they ignore injuries that should incapacitate them. Most importantly, observe how they escalate their tactical sophistication as the threat increases. On the screen, human fighters moved through the transport's corridors like predators who had done this 1,000 times before. They anticipated enemy movements, set perfect ambushes, and adapted their strategies in real time. But it was their faces that truly disturbed Zektar. There was no fear, no hesitation, no doubt. Only cold, calculating purpose. Boarding wave, Zektar continued. 60 soldiers, then 100, then 150. Each time, the humans not only repelled them, but improved their tactics. By the third wave, they were predicting Kethmori movements before the Kethmori themselves knew what they were going to do. High Counselor Vekmar leaned forward in his chair. Show me the archaeological comparison data. Zektar transmitted files that had been classified for over 3,000 years. Ancient battlefield recordings from the Krantai campaigns. The similarities were undeniable. Same inhuman coordination, the same tactical evolution under pressure, the same ability to turn any environment into a weapon. High Counselor, there is more, Zektar said quietly. The humans are not just fighting, they are protecting. Every action they take prioritizes the safety of non-combatants. They sacrifice tactical advantages to ensure civilian survival. This was perhaps the most disturbing development of all. The Krantai had been conquerors, spreading across the galaxy like a plague of war. But these humans were showing the same capabilities while acting as protectors. The combination of ultimate fighting ability with protective instincts created something the galaxy had never seen before. What is the current situation? Vekmar asked. War leader Krexton has called for reinforcements. The Kethmori High Command is sending a full battle fleet, 12 warships, and 5,000 soldiers. They believe this is a matter of honor that requires overwhelming force. The High Counselor's expression grew grim. They do not understand what they are facing. No. High Counselor, they think they are dealing with surprisingly capable civilians. They have no concept of what happens when you threaten innocence in front of humans who have entered the Berserker state. Meanwhile, in the combat zone, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Fleet cruiser USS Defiance as it dropped out of hyperspace. The ship carried 800 Marines under the command of Colonel Sam Rivera. Along with the most advanced military technology Earth could provide, Jake had been hoping for a diplomatic solution when they received the distress call from New Haven. Now, studying the tactical display showing the expanding Kethmori fleet, he realized that diplomacy was no longer an option. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Ben Parker from the sensor station, "I'm reading multiple Kethmori signatures. 12 warships. In attack formation, plus support vessels. They've got us outnumbered 4-1. Jake nodded grimly. "Any word from the transport, Hopeston?" "Yes, sir," replied Communications Officer Kate Sullivan. "They're still transmitting. The civilians are safe, but they're under constant attack. The Kethmori have been sending boarding parties every few hours for the past 2 days. How are they holding out?" Kate's expression was puzzled. "Sir, according to their reports, they've repelled 7 separate boarding attempts. Total Kethmori casualties are over 400 soldiers." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. The transport Hope's Dawn was a civilian cargo hauler with no military capabilities. The idea that it could hold off multiple assault waves from the galaxy's premier warrior species should have been impossible.
"Victor," Lieutenant Parker called.
From his station, "I'm getting detailed scanner readings on the transport now. There are definitely humans aboard, but something is strange about their life signs." "Strange how?"
"How?"
"Their brain activity is unlike anything I've seen before. Elevated neural activity in regions associated with spatial awareness, tactical thinking, and threat assessment. But depression in areas linked to fear response and self-preservation." Colonel Sam Rivera entered the bridge at that moment. She was a veteran of Earth's bloodiest conflicts, a soldier who had earned her rank through combat leadership and tactical brilliance. But even she looked concerned as she approached Jake. "Captain, I've been reviewing the combat reports from New Haven and the transport," she said quietly. "My professional assessment is that these reports are impossible." "Impossible how?" "According to the data, 9 civilian scientists held off 47 Kethmori soldiers for 6 hours and won. Then those same civilians, along with a cargo pilot and some wounded aliens, have been defeating trained assault troops for 2 days straight." Jake studied the tactical display. "What's your explanation?" Colonel Rivera was quiet for a moment. "Sir, I've read the classified briefings about human berserker states. I thought they were theoretical, psychological profiles and historical speculation. But if those reports are accurate, do you think we're seeing the real thing, Captain?" "I think we're seeing something that's going to change how the galaxy views humanity forever." Their conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission. The main screen showed War Leader Crexthon, his scarred features twisted with rage and frustration. "Earth vessel," Crexthon snarled. "You will withdraw immediately. This is Kethmori. Space, and these criminals are under sentence of execution." Jake stepped forward to respond. "War Leader, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. The beings you're attacking are civilian researchers under Coalition protection. I'm ordering you to cease hostilities and withdraw." Crexton's laugh was harsh and mocking. "You order me? Soft-skinned weaklings who hide behind technology? I have destroyed your transport's defenders twice over, yet somehow they continue to resist. But no matter. When my reinforcements arrive, we will end this farce." "Your reinforcements?" "The Kethmori Death Fleet approaches. 25 warships, and 10,000 of our finest warriors. Your pathetic single ship will be crushed, and these strange humans will learn why the galaxy fears the Kethmori Empire." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a tactical situation that had just become exponentially worse. 25 enemy warships against his single cruiser. Under normal circumstances, it would be a massacre. But as he looked at the life sign readings from the transport Hope's Dawn, where a handful of humans continued to defy an entire battle fleet, Jake began to wonder if normal circumstances applied anymore. "Colonel Rivera," he said quietly, "prepare your Marines for deployment." "And Colonel?" "Yes, sir? Make sure they understand what they're supporting down there. According to the reports, our people haven't just been fighting, they've been winning." "Colonel." Rivera nodded grimly. "Sir, if the reports are accurate, Our people have discovered something that's been sleeping in human genetics for thousands of years. Something that's about to wake up on a galactic scale. On his command ship, War Leader Crexton studied the new Earth vessel with contempt. One ship against his growing fleet, the humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid.
Either
way, they would be dead soon enough. But deep in his warrior's instincts, something nagged at him. His grandfather's stories about the ancient enemy that could not be defeated. The old legends about warriors who fought like spirits of war itself. As he watched the Earth ship move into position to defend the transport, Crexton found himself wondering if those old stories had been warnings after all. In his private chambers, Ambassador Zektar continued his urgent communication with the Veltar High Council. High Counselor, the situation is escalating beyond our ability to contain it. The Kethmori are committing their death fleet to this conflict, and the humans. The space around New Haven filled with warships, as the Kethmori death fleet arrived in a blaze of engine fire and weapon charges. 25 massive vessels arranged themselves in perfect battle formation, their hulls bristling with enough firepower to level planets. War Leader Crexton stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, and smiled with savage satisfaction. Across from the Kethmori fleet, the Earth ships looked pitifully small. The USS Defiance had been joined by 4 more vessels, the destroyers Lightning and Thunder, the cruiser Independence, and the carrier Vengeance. Admiral Frank Cooper, who had taken overall command of the Earth fleet, like thought, studied the tactical display with grim determination. Admiral reported as tactical officer, Lieutenant Danny White, the Kethmori have us outnumbered 5-1. Their ships are larger and more heavily armed than ours. Admiral Cooper nodded. Under normal circumstances, this would be a hopeless battle. But the reports from the transport hopes Dawn had changed everything. If humans could really enter the berserker state that the reports described, then normal circumstances might not apply. Any word from our people on the transport? Cooper asked. Yes, sir, replied Communications Officer Linda Hayes. Dr. Rodriguez reports they're ready for final extraction. But, sir, she's requesting permission to remain aboard and continue fighting. Cooper raised an eyebrow. She wants to keep fighting. They've been under siege for 3 days. Sir, according to her report, they've eliminated over 600 Kethmori soldiers while protecting 43 civilian refugees. She says they're just getting started. Before Cooper could respond, War Leader Crexton's image appeared on the main screen. The Kethmori commander looked even more scarred and angry than before. His forearms gestured aggressively as he spoke. Earth, Admiral Crexton snarled. You have one opportunity to avoid total destruction. Surrender the transport and its occupants to Kethmori justice. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why the galaxy fears our empire. Admiral Cooper stepped forward calmly. War Leader, I counter with a different proposal. Withdraw your forces immediately, or discover why the galaxy should fear humanity. Crexton's expression shifted to one of disbelief, then rage. You dare threaten the Kethmori death fleet with 5 pathetic ships? I'm not threatening you with 5 ships, Cooper replied quietly. I'm threatening you with the humans aboard. Them. The transmission ended, and both fleets prepared for battle. But something strange began happening on the human ships. Every Marine, every pilot, every engineer who had heard the reports from New Haven felt something awakening inside them. The knowledge that their fellow humans had been fighting impossible odds for days triggered a response that ran deeper than training or technology kernel. Sam Rivera felt it first as she prepared her Marines for boarding operations. The fear that should have accompanied facing overwhelming odds simply wasn't there. Instead, she felt a cold clarity that made every tactical option crystal clear. Marines, she announced over the ship's communication system, we're about to face an enemy that thinks we're weak because we're human. Today we show them that being human is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. The response from her troops was unlike anything she had ever heard. Not cheers or battle cries, but a low, synchronized sound that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and primal. Every Marine on every ship made the same sound at the same time, though none of them knew why. On the Kethmori flagship, War Leader Crexton heard that sound transmitted across all frequencies. His warrior instincts, honed by centuries of combat, suddenly screamed warnings that his logical mind couldn't understand. What was that sound? He demanded of his communications officer. Unknown war leader. Came from all the human ships. Simultaneously, Crexon stared at the tactical display. Something was wrong. His sensors were showing strange readings from the human vessels, energy patterns that didn't match their ship designs. Brain activity levels among the human crews that exceeded anything in his database. Begin the attack, he ordered. All ships, open fire. The Kethmori Death Fleet unleashed enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Energy beams and missile salvos filled the void between the opposing forces. The human ships, impossibly outnumbered, responded with their own weapons. But something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't fight like a conventional fleet. Instead of maintaining formation and trading long-range fire, they scattered in patterns that confused Kethmori targeting computers. Each ship moved independently. Yet somehow, they coordinated perfectly, without seeming to communicate. The USS Lightning, smallest of the human vessels, suddenly accelerated directly toward the Kethmori battle line. Every tactical program in the galaxy would have classified this as suicide, a single destroyer against 25 warships. But Captain Kelly Johnson, commanding the Lightning, had entered the same berserker state as the humans on the transport. She saw opportunities where computers saw only death. The Lightning slipped between two massive Kethmori vessels, using their own bulk to shield it from the rest of the fleet, and launched its entire missile payload into the engine sections. Of both ships, the two Kethmori vessels, each 10 times larger than the Lightning, suffered catastrophic damage as their reactor cores destabilized. One exploded outright. The other spun helplessly out of formation, its crew dead or dying. Impossible, breathed War Leader Crexton. How did they predict our formation gaps? His tactical officer, a veteran of hundreds of battles, stared at his displays in confusion. Sir, their attack patterns don't match any known tactical doctrine. Our computers can't predict their movements. The battle continued, but it wasn't going as the Kethmori had planned. The human ships fought like a pack of predators, each one, supporting the others through actions that seemed suicidal but proved devastatingly effective. They used the debris from destroyed Kethmori ships as cover, turned asteroid fields into weapon platforms, and coordinated attacks that no military/academy in the galaxy would have thought possible. But it was when the boarding actions began that the true horror of fighting humans became clear. The USS Vengeance, Admiral Cooper's flagship, deliberately allowed itself to be boarded by 300 Kethmori assault troops. The elite soldiers stormed aboard, expecting to capture the human command ship and end the battle quickly. Instead, they found themselves trapped inside a vessel that had become a hunting ground. The human crew, from Admiral Cooper down to maintenance worker Chris Taylor, had entered a collective berserker state that turned the ship into a three-dimensional battlefield where the Kethmori advantages meant nothing. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez led a squad of Marines through the ship's corridors, but they weren't following standard combat procedures. They moved like hunters who had done this for millions of years, using the ship's systems in ways that defied logic but worked perfectly. The Kethmori soldiers found themselves fighting an enemy that ignored wounds, anticipated their movements, and used every surface of the ship as a potential weapon. Human engineers modified the ship's systems in real time, creating traps and ambushes that no military manual had ever described. Most disturbing of all, the humans protected each other with a dedication that went beyond loyalty or training. When Kethmori soldiers threatened wounded humans, their comrades would display tactical brilliance that bordered on the supernatural. Within 2 hours, all 300 Kethmori boarders were dead or unconscious. The human casualties numbered less than 20, and even the wounded continued fighting until the threat was eliminated. War Leader Crexton watched his tactical display with growing horror as similar scenes played out across his fleet. Kethmori soldiers, trained from birth for combat, were being systematically eliminated by humans who fought like nothing in his experience. Sir, his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, we're receiving surrender requests. From 7 of our ships, the boarding parties are being ... eliminated. Kethmori do not surrender, Crexton snarled. But his voice lacked conviction. The battle's turning point came when Admiral Cooper made a decision that would be studied in military academies for centuries. Instead of accepting the surrender of damaged Kethmori vessels, he ordered his forces to continue the assault until every enemy ship was disabled. But he did something else that shocked both sides. He ordered his Marines to rescue Kethmori survivors. Colonel Rivera found herself leading rescue operations aboard enemy ships, saving the lives of soldiers who had been trying to kill her minutes before. The berserker state that made humans so dangerous in combat also made them fierce protectors of anyone they perceived as defenseless. The final moments of the battle came when War Leader Crexton, his flagship surrounded and disabled, received a transmission from Admiral Cooper. War Leader, Cooper said calmly, your fleet is defeated. Surrender now, and we'll provide medical aid to your survivors. Crexton stared at the human admiral through the screen. Everything he had believed about warfare, about strength, about the natural order of the galaxy, had been shattered in the past few hours. How? He asked quietly. How did you defeat us? We are the greatest warriors in known space? Cooper's expression was almost sympathetic. War Leader, you fight for conquest and glory. But